Vedgadadhara Shavasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukham Karoti Vachanam Pramangati Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurudina Taranam Paramanandam Madhavam Namahum Vishwadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurvani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunavadi Paschachadeshikarane. Hare Krishna, thank you for joining. So we will start with, so we ended last time with chapter 21st. So we will start with chapter 22. So 22 and 20, 22, 23, 24, they're probably one of the more complicated chapters in Canto 5 because they deal with the motion of the planets. And essentially, when Srila Prabhupada wanted the Vedic planetarium to be built, he wanted it to demonstrate this motion. So as I mentioned, the cosmology part of it is divided into three parts. The first is the horizontal structure of the universe, the Bhumandal. The second is the vertical structure of the universe, the heavenly planets, the four upper planetary system, the seven lower planetary system. And that part is relatively easier to understand because it's just like making a graph with words. So the distances are given. It's fairly straightforward to use those distances and construct a three-dimensional model. Now, Sukadeva Goswami begins to explain the motion of the heavenly planets. And the reason he does this, and the reason Srila Prabhupada wanted to focus on this, is that it now will correlate the structure of the universe, the dynamic aspect of the universe described in the Bhagavatam, to what we empirically observe. Right? So we make this point, Jiva Goswami makes this point, that to acquire knowledge, Shraddha is important, faith is important. But eventually, the faith needs to be supplemented with pratyaksh at some point of time. That you cannot keep expecting that say, take this on faith, take this on faith. Somebody tells you chant, why? Take it on faith. Mahaprabhu asked us to do it, and the person would chant. What's the advantage of chanting? You'll feel material detachment, spiritual attachment, you'll feel at peace. Why do we say that? Because those are the verifiable aspects of the philosophy. That after a person is chanting, then the person will come back and say, yes, I do feel that difference. I feel myself more connected to Krishna. I feel lesser agitated. So the pratyaksh part of Shabda is important. And these chapters essentially are the pratyaksh part of Shabda. That theoretically, Sukadeva Goswami has described the universe. Now he puts the universe, it's like you make a machine. Now he puts the machine into motion. And what the behavior that it will demonstrate should reconcile with the behavior that you can see. Right? And that will basically reaffirm faith. I was talking to one of the senior devotees, Prabhupada disciple, and he was laughingly saying that in our time, the fifth canto was considered to be the devotee killer. Because after reading fifth canto, people would basically completely get bewildered. That the sun is not at the center, the earth is at the center, the sun is the only star, there are no other stars, and there is a chariot somewhere, on which there is a personality that is riding the chariot. Now, the Bhagavatam is anyway full of lot of extraordinary details, but these are the kind of details that people are trying to reconcile with the astronomical observations, the empirical observations. So they would lose faith. And sometimes the temple presidents, etc., they would say, don't read these chapters. They would say, just skip to the 26th chapter, which talks about the hellish planets, the where what people suffer by doing sinful activities. They would say, just read that chapter there. And the 26th chapter is actually a devotee maker, because after reading the destination of one who is suffering or destined to suffer sinful reactions, then one is more inclined to take to bhakti, because bhakti is our ultimate protection. But Srila Prabhupada, in his wisdom, realized that we can turn this into our biggest asset. That if we are able to prove that the empirical part of the universe demonstrates a behavior consistent with what we see, then instead of a devotee killer, he'll become a devotee maker. So, with that introduction, let's start with chapter 22 of Canto 5, titled The Orbits of the Planets. It's a small chapter with 17 verses, divided into 3 parts. The first 7 verses talk about the glories of the sun. And the next 3 verses, 8, 9, and 10, talk about the glories of the moon and the movement. And the remaining 7 verses describe the other stars above the sun and the moon. Okay, so start with verse 1. King Parikshit inquired from Sukadeva Goswami, "My dear Lord, you have already affirmed the truth that the supremely powerful sun god travels around Dhruvaloka, with both Dhruvaloka and Mount Sumeru on his right. Yet at the same time, the sun god faces the signs of the zodiac and keeps Sumeru and Dhruvaloka on his left. How can we reasonably accept that the sun god proceeds with Sumeru and Dhruvaloka on both his right and left simultaneously?" So this question came from the 8th verse of the previous chapter, when Sukadeva Goswami mentions that the sun simultaneously travels in both a clockwise and anti-clockwise direction. So Parikshit Maharaj made a note of it at the time, waited for Sukadeva Goswami to finish the line of speech, and now he puts this query on, that clockwise and anti-clockwise are obviously opposite directions. So how can the same body move in both the directions at the same time? One can understand that one moves clockwise for some time, then anti-clockwise for another time. That can be accepted. But how can at the same time the sun move in both a clockwise and anti-clockwise direction? So he puts this question before Sukadeva Goswami. And so let's see the answer of Sukadeva Goswami. Srila Sukadeva Goswami clearly answered, "When a potter's wheel is moving and small ants located on that big wheel are moving with it, one can see that their motion is different from that of the wheel, because they appear sometimes on one part of the wheel and sometimes on another. Similarly, the signs and constellations with Sumeru and Dhruvaloka on the right move with the wheel of time, and the ant-like sun and planets move with them. The sun and planets, however, are seen in different signs and constellations at different times. This indicates that the motion is different from that of the zodiac and the wheel of time itself." So let's take a look at the analogy that Sukadeva Goswami is speaking about. That so everybody is familiar with the potter's wheel, right? It's basically a wheel that the potters, they have a stick and they move it, and then it spins. So Sukadeva Goswami says that consider a potter wheel spinning, and then consider an ant on the rim of the potter's wheel that is also moving at the same time. So that particular ant has two kinds of motions. One, because of the fact that it is sitting on the potter's wheel, it gets a certain kind of motion. And the second, because the ant itself is moving, it gets another motion. So Sukadeva Goswami uses this analogy to make this point that a single body can have two kinds of motions at the same time. So this explains how the sun can move at the same time in the clockwise and anti-clockwise direction. So let's expand this a little bit further in terms of what is actually happening in this part of the universe. So if you take a step back, then at the middle of the universe is the Bhumandal. And the Bhumandal is fixed. It does not move. So we have the Saptadvipas. We have the Jambu Dweep and the Kusha Dweep and the Shaka Dweep. So all these dweeps that are there, they are fixed in the Bhumandal. On the Bhumandal also resides our Earth planet, which is also fixed, static, does not move. Now, after the Bhumandal is the Antariksh, the space, then is the Bhuvar Loka, then is the Swarg Loka. On top of the Swarg Loka is the Saptarishis. On top of the Saptarishis is the Dhruva Loka. Dhruva Loka also does not move. So it is fixed. So if you look at it from a vertical perspective, we have 2 points of reference that do not move: the Bhumandal and the Dhruvaloka. Now, everything within these 2 points is rotating. And they are rotating at a fixed speed. So Srila Prabhupada called this the chandelier model, which is essentially going to be displayed at the TOVP. So consider a chandelier that is hanging from an anchor in the roof. And so when I said that Dhruva Loka does not move, it does not move from its position, but it does spin at its position. So while it is situated at a fixed position, it does spin around its own axis. So because of the spinning of Dhruva Loka, so now consider a chandelier that is suspended from an anchor point, and that anchor is spinning. So when that anchor spins, the chandelier moves along with that anchor. So this movement is known as Kal Chakra. So every heavenly body between Bhulok and Dhruvlok is moving at a constant speed in a clockwise direction, which is known as Kal Chakra. Okay, so far is clear that we have the chandelier hanging at an anchor. The chandelier is spinning at a constant speed. Everything that is sitting on the chandelier is also moving at a constant speed. Okay.
Prabhu, one question before you move forward.
Sure.
I understood that the earth is on the potter's wheel, okay? And the wheel is, let's say, is rotating in the clockwise direction. Is the earth walking in the anti-clockwise direction?
Not necessary. So the reason that Sukadev Goswami uses that analogy is to indicate how there can be relative motion between two things. So this is not necessarily because of anti-clock, that the ants are moving in an anti-clockwise direction, but simply to indicate that if one object is not anchored to the other, there is always the possibility of having a relative motion. And so that's the main point that we should take home, that the potter wheel is like the Kal Chakra. So all the heavenly bodies are anchored to Dhruv and they're all moving together at a constant speed, right? So that's one thing that we should understand. Now let's look at the exceptions. So
One more question, Prabhuji. With the chandelier example that you gave, only the heavenly bodies are considered to be part of that chandelier example, but not the Bhumandal,
not the Bhumandal, not the Dhruv.
not the Dhruv.
So Dhruv is fixed,
Yeah.
Bhumandal is fixed.
Okay.
But everything above the Bhumandal and everything below the Dhruv is the chandelier,
Okay.
including the Saptarishis, the 7 planets, the heavenly planets, all the zodiacs, the constellations, the Shishumar, the whole thing is now the chandelier,
Yeah.
and all moving at a fixed clockwise speed.
Only that is part of the Kala Chakra.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. So, this part of the discussion, make it as interactive as possible, because keep interrupting me if you have any clarifications. Otherwise, it's difficult to digest a lot of it and then ask questions. So as soon as you have a question, just interrupt me, and I'll try and explain to you. Now, we have established that between the Bhumandal and the Dhruv, which are the two fixed pivots, everything is moving at a constant speed, which is considered to be the Kal Chakra. Now the exceptions come. With the exceptions of certain heavenly bodies that move at a different speed. So they have a speed, the speed of rotation of these heavenly bodies is different from the speed of the Kal Chakra. And these heavenly bodies are essentially the Navgraha. So the 9 planets, of which the sun is one of them, they move at their own speed, which is different from that of Kal Chakra. Okay, so now what do we have what's the picture that we have? We have the Kal Chakra that is moving at a fixed speed, and we have the Navagraha that is also moving at a fixed speed in the same direction, but with a different speed from the Kal Chakra. Now, how does this difference in the speed manifest? So we will now speak specifically about sun. So the sun moves at a speed that is 1 degree slower than that of the Kal Chakra over 1 revolution. So when the Kal Chakra makes a 360 degrees revolution, the sun makes a revolution of 359 degrees. Now, specifically, it is 0.98 degrees, 97 degrees, but let's not worry about the exact numbers. Let's just consider that it is moving 1 degree slower than the Kal Chakra. Now, to understand how this manifests, I'm going to use another analogy, that let's consider that there is a circular racetrack. Right? So we all see this racetracks in which people race. So let's consider there is a circular racetrack and 2 boys are running on the racetrack in the same direction. Boy 1 is running a little faster than boy 2. So when boy 1 is running, then because boy 2 is running a little slower, then over time, the distance between boy 1 and boy 2 will increase, right? Now, if you look at it from a relative perspective, so let us assume that boy 1 is stationary. So what would be the direction of the movement of boy 2? Okay, so let's imagine it in our mind. Boy 1 and boy 2 both are running in a clockwise direction. Boy 1 is running a little faster than boy 2, right? So as they run, the distance between boy 2 will lag more and more behind boy 1. Okay. Now, if you look at it from a relative perspective, and if you assume boy 1 to be static, what is the direction in which boy 2 is running?
Backwards, Prabhuji.
Backwards, right? Anti-clockwise.
Anti-clockwise.
Right. So now we can say that boy 2 is running both in a clockwise direction as well as a anti-clockwise direction. So the boy 2 is running in a clockwise direction in an absolute sense. If we take boy 1 out of the race, then, and somebody says, what direction is boy 2 running? Clockwise. If you put boy 1 in the race and say, what is the direction in which boy 2 is running with respect to boy 1? It's going to be anti-clockwise. So that is what the sun is doing. That the sun is moving in the same direction as the Kal Chakra, but it is running slower. So every day it is behind by 1 degree, which means that over 365 days, it is behind by 360 degrees, which means that after 365 days, boy 1 and boy 2 are in again the same position. Now, boy 2 is 1 lap behind boy 1, but from the perspective of the position on the racetrack, they are together again. Okay, so we now have 2 motions of the sun. One is the sun rotating around Mount Meru. It covers 1 rotation in a day. So that rotation causes day and night. In 24 hours, it covers 1 clockwise rotation around Mount Meru. Also, relative to the Shishumar, relative to the Kal Chakra, it completes 1 rotation in the anti-clockwise direction over 365 days. So that is the year. So that's how we understand the day and the year of the sun. Now the sun has 3 movements. One is the clockwise movement in an absolute. The third is the anti-clockwise movement relative to the Kal Chakra. And the third is the vertical movement that we will talk about later. Right? So just remember that the sun has these 3 movements, which essentially explains the happening of the day and night, the occurrence of the winter, the year and the seasons, and also the Uttarayan and the Uttarayan, and what's the opposite of Uttarayan? Dakshinayan. Uttarayan and Dakshayan. Right. So that we will study later on. But I just want to make sure that you're clear about the 3 movements of the sun. Any questions on that?
No questions, Prabhuji. First time actually I understood the year, how it works. It is how anti-clockwise sun movement to 360 degrees. That makes it.
Okay, thank you. Very good. So let's move on to the 3rd verse. The original cause of the cosmic manifestation is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan. When great saintly persons, fully aware of the Vedic knowledge, offered praise to the Supreme Person, he descended to the material world in the form of the sun to benefit all the planets and purify fruitive activities. he divided himself into 12 parts and created seasonal forms, beginning with spring. In this way, he created seasonal qualities such as heat, cold, and so on. So we understand now that one anti-clockwise movement of the sun with respect to the Kal Chakra is 1 year. Now, Sukdev Goswami is saying that that one anti-clockwise movement is divided into 12 parts, which is 12 months. Now, this division is arbitrary, but the reason it is divided into 12 parts is because later on he will explain the 12 zodiacs, the 12 rashis, that as the sun moves in an anti-clockwise direction, because the zodiacs are moving along with the Kal Chakra at the same speed of Kal Chakra. So the sun will move through the zodiacs in an anti-clockwise direction. And there are 12 zodiacs, so it takes a month to cross each zodiac. And that's how we get the 12 months. Okay, and the other point that is made here is also there are 6 seasons. So basically each of the 2 months creates a seasons. Now what causes the variance in the season will be explained later on. That is caused by the vertical movement of the sun, and that we'll see later on. Verse 4. According to the system of the 4 Varnas and 4 ashrams, people generally worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan, who is situated as the Sun God. With great faith, they worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the Super Soul according to ritualistic ceremonies handed down in the 3 Vedas, such as Agnihotra and similar higher and lower fruitive activities, and according to the process of mystic yoga. In this way, they very easily attain the ultimate goal of life. So, the sun god is also known as Surya Narayan. So Prabhupada at some point says that even though he's a demigod, but he's a special demigod, because Krishna has specifically invested his potency in Surya Dev. Now, because of the movement of Surya Dev, the cycle of karma begins. Because if you look at it this way, that if each one of us are kept in a dark hall and nothing changes, it's just a dark hall. I can't see anybody, nobody can see me. There is no morning, afternoon, evening. I was reading about this particular prison they have opened in Brazil, which is for the most heinous offenders, because they don't have a death sentence over there. But then there are some criminals who are like very, very degraded. So what they do is they have a prison that is built, which is completely enclosed. There's no sunlight that comes in over there. And essentially, there is nothing in the prison. They were showing the picture of the prison. All they have is steel. It's like you have like a shelf with steel, a rack with steel shelves on it. They don't have any pillows, no blankets, nothing. And basically, the people just lie over there, and very little external interaction there. Now, even there, they have some sense of today, tomorrow, day after, but essentially they have been deprived of all the changes that are happening. And they were showing the pictures of the prisoners. They're essentially almost catatonic. They're almost like they've ceased to be human beings. So sun has this special role that it creates morning, afternoon, evenings, night. It creates the notion of days, weeks, and months. It gives us a sense through seasons, what to look forward to, what has gone by. And because of this, the jivas began to perform karma. So even though the sun is not the cause of the fruitive activities, but it is facilitating it. If there would have been no sun, there would be no karma. So that is why sun is also glorified, because it creates this venue by giving this sense. So if you look into our lives, so much is driven by the sense of time. And what is time? Very difficult to define time, because everything that we call time can be challenged. That why is this a day? Why can't this be a day? Why does it have 24 hours? In the Vedic system, it has an hour is actually 24 minutes. So why 60 minutes? Why not 24 minutes? A muhurat is 2 gatikas, 48 minutes. So everything with time can be challenged, because everything is arbitrary. In the scholars say that at the end of the day, there is only one real definition of time that Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, time I am the destroyer of everything. So time essentially is destruction. That is the only real aspect of time. Everything else is basically the jiva using it for something else. So because and now Surya Dev does not create time. Like time is Krishna. But Surya Dev is like a clock that you keep in your house. So when the hands in the clock move, you know that time is going. But nobody will say that because my clock hands are moving, time is moving. It's the other way around. That we have some theoretical concept of the movement of time, we use it to measure using the clock hands. That's all Surya Dev is doing. That by the rising and the setting, it is establishing a certain cadence into time. But Sukadeva Goswami is saying that according to the Varnas and the ashrams, people worship Surya Narayan. Right? So all this Varnas, ashrams, karma, vikarma, all that is created by the presence of the sun and its movement. That is why it is special. Okay, verse 5. The sun god, who is Narayan or Vishnu, the soul of all the worlds, is situated in outer space between the upper and the lower portions of the universe. Passing through 12 months on the wheel of time, the sun comes in touch with the 12 different signs of the zodiacs and assumes 12 different names according to those signs. The aggregate of those 12 months is called a samvatsar, or an entire year. According to lunar calculations, 2 fortnights, one of the waxing moon and one of the waning, form 1 month. The same period is 1 day and night for the planet of Pitraloka. According to stellar calculation, a month equals 2 1/4 constellation. When the sun travels for 2 months, a season passes, and therefore the seasonal changes are considered parts of the body of the year. So these are very packed verses. Sukadeva Goswami is basically condensing 2 or 3 books of cosmology in verses. And his intention is not to go into details. For one thing, Parikshit Maharaj knows everything. And secondly, for our benefit, he's noting it. But his focus is only to glorify the Lord. So he goes through it very quickly. So let's see what he is talking about, right? So he's saying that the sun is now moving in an anti-clockwise direction with respect to the Kal Chakra. Now, stuck on that Kal Chakra at a fixed height above the Bhumandal is the group of stars that are known as constellations. So the constellations can be divided into 12 parts. And they get their names based on the shape of the star formation in that particular constellation, that particular zodiac, sorry, not constellation. So we are talking about zodiacs. So if you look at the full 360 of the Kal Chakra, at a certain height, we have these zodiacs. And the zodiac signs, they're like Aries and Taurus and Gemini. Why do they get this name, Taurus the bull? Because the stars, you draw a line through them, it kind of looks like, maybe, you have to use your imagination, but it looks like a bull. Or in Gemini, you draw the line through the stars, looks like there are two people standing. Now, again, it's not a clear artistic picture that there are two people standing, but if somebody tells you, can you see two people standing? Then you can say, okay, maybe if I try hard enough, I can see two people standing. So that's how they get the name, that Aries and Taurus and Gemini. So they are moving in the clockwise direction at the speed of the Kal Chakra. Because the sun is moving slower than the Kal Chakra, it is moving through the zodiacs in an anti-clockwise direction. And because of the width of these zodiac signs, the sun takes 1 month to traverse each zodiac. So there are 12 zodiac signs and there are 12 months. So now we are able to divide 1 year into 12 months, right? So that part is now clear. In this verse, now Sukadeva Goswami introduces the moon. So just like the sun, the moon also has an angular velocity that is different from the Kal Chakra. Okay, so let's go back to our example of having a circular track. And now instead of 2 boys, let us consider that there are 3 boys that are running. There is boy 1 that is running the fastest. There is boy 2 that is running a little slower than boy 1. And then there is boy 3 that is running a lot slower than boy 2. So if we were to take it relative to boy 1, then boy 2 gets a certain speed in an anti-clockwise direction, right? Since the boy 3 is running a lot slower than boy 1, the retrograde speed of boy 3 is much higher than boy 2. Okay, so let's assume the boy 1 completes 1 full round in 12 months. Let's assume boy 2, and I'm picking arbitrary numbers, not real numbers. Let's assume boy 2 takes 11 months to complete the round. So what is the anti-clockwise speed of boy 2? 1 month per year, right? 1 month it's moving in an opposite direction. Now the boy 3 is running at the speed of it takes, instead of 12 months, it takes 18 months to cover the round. So what is the relative speed of boy 3 with respect to boy 1 in an anti-clockwise direction? It is 6 months per round. So because boy 3 is running a lot slower than boy 2, its anti-clockwise speed is a lot higher than boy 2. So that is the relationship between sun and moon. So both the sun and the moon are running slower than the Kal Chakra. But the sun is losing a degree a day, the moon is losing 13 degrees a day. Right? So in an opposite direction, the moon is moving 12 degrees faster than the sun. So just like, because the sun slips a degree a day, it gets the solar year. The moon, by slipping 13 degrees, in 1 year, it gets the lunar year. And just like the sun, by making 1 round in the clockwise direction, gets a day, the moon again, by moving in a clockwise direction, gets the lunar day. So here Sukdev Goswami is talking about the relative speeds of the sun and the moon. That when the sun makes 1 full round, it passes through the 12 rashis or zodiacs. Now, because the moon is moving faster than the sun and relative to the Kal Chakra, so in the time that the sun moves through, so just like the sun is moving through zodiacs, the moon is moving through constellations. And just like there are 12 zodiacs, there are 27 constellations. And the constellations again are essentially a collection of stars. Or as in the Bhagavatam it is said, that each of the constellation is a house that is occupied by one of the wives of Somadev. So the 25 daughters of Daksha who were given in marriage to Somadev, they live in this 25 constellations, right? So the zodiacs in Sanskrit are the Rashis and the constellations are the Nakshatras. So as the moon is moving rapidly in an anti-clockwise direction, it is with respect to the sun, it is now moving much faster. So if you consider that 1 full 360 is divided into 12 zodiacs, and the same 360 is divided into 27 constellations, then we can understand that each zodiac is 2 1/4 of a constellation. So the time that it takes for the sun to travel through one zodiac is 1 solar month, and 12 such months form a solar year, and 2 months in each year forms a season. Okay, so we have understood the movements of the sun. We have also understood the movements of the year. Now, Sukdev Goswami says that
Prabhuji, I'm little confused, Prabhuji. Like, are we moon movement also is going in the backward direction? So it is moving in the anti-clockwise direction in a much faster pace because of its relative slower speed. So far we are only comparing the moon speed with respect to the Kala Chakra speed, and that is where only the 27 constellations are coming in picture. Are we so far compared the movement of moon with respect to the sun also, Prabhuji, or no?
we will do that later on.
Okay, not yet.
Yeah, so when we compare the solar month to the lunar month, then we will make that comparison. But just like we said that when the sun moves in a retrograde direction, it completes an year when it completes 1 full round, it completes an year. Because the moon is moving much faster, it completes the same circular distance in 1 month. So that is considered to be so a lunar day and a night is considered to be 1 month for the solar. So the time that it takes for the sun to travel a month, the moon travels in a day, right? And this we'll expand on later on. But Sukdev Goswami talks about that 1 day and night for the planet of Pitralok. So on the moon, there are 2 lokas, right? Half the moon that is facing the earth is occupied by demigods. And half the moon, and they are the sadhyas, and half the moon that is not facing the earth is occupied by the pitras. Right? So Pitralok is situated on moon. Now, that's not the only location of Pitralok, but that is one of the location of Pitralok, is on the far side of the moon. Okay, so
And
let's move on.
one more question, Prabhuji. We are referencing the sun's retrograde motion of making one full circle is 1 year. Many times we refer the year starts with this particular month, like that we say. So on the Kala Chakra, any specific point is taken as a arbitrary location that marks as completion of circle?
It is. When we do a little bit of, so they consider one particular zodiac on the Kal Chakra, and when the sun enters that zodiac, the year starts there, and then they start counting from there, right? So they do have a reference point.
Yes.
From there.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, one more question about the moon. Are we talking about our little moon that rotates around the Earth?
It does, because the Earth is located on the Bhumandal, right? And the Bhumandal is fixed, and everything is rotating around the Bhumandal. So the sun is rotating around the Earth, the moon is rotating around the Earth, Mercury is rotating, Venus, all the Navagraha, they're rotating around the Bhumandal. And since Earth is on the Bhumandal, we can say it's rotating around the Earth. And so this is essentially what earlier on used to be the geocentric model, that the Earth is the center and everything is moving. Now, that's not precisely true. The Earth is not the center. The Bhumandal is anchored and fixed. The center actually is Mount Meru. So if you draw a vertical line from Mount Meru to Dhruvaloka, that is the axis around which everything is rotating. That line is basically the axis of the Shishumar. And everything is rotating around that line. Now, because the Earth is fixed and everything is rotating, on the Earth you will get the sense that everything is moving around you. But if somebody is situated somewhere in Jambudweep or in any of the other dweeps on Bhumandal, they will get exactly the same experience, that everything is rotating, because they are also fixed and anchored to the Bhumandal.
Thank you.
Okay. Verse 6. Thus, the time the sun takes to rotate half of the outer space is called ayan, or its period of movement in the north or in the south. Right. So, what Sukdev Goswami is doing now is that you consider that there is a circular Kal Chakra which has 12 spokes on it. And each of the spoke, the arc of the Kal Chakra, and this is not really Kal Chakra, let's call it the time wheel, because this is essentially the movement of the sun relative to Kal Chakra. So each of the arc between the spoke represents 1 month. Then he said 2 of those arcs represent a season. Now he's saying that 6 of those arcs represent a half a year. And so he's just building the concept of how the year is divided. That the year is made of 12 months. Each month is the time it takes to go through one zodiac, 2 months from a season, and 6 months, they form half a year. Okay, verse 7. The sun god has 3 speeds: slow, fast, and moderate. The time he takes to travel entirely around the sphere of heaven, earth, and space at these 3 speeds is referred to by the learned scholars by 5 names: Samvatsara, Parivatsara, Idavatsara, Anuvatsara, and Vatsara. So Prabhupada says that according to the solar astronomical calculation, each year extends 6 days beyond the calendar year. And according to the lunar calculation, each year is 6 days shorter. Therefore, because of the movements of the sun and the moon, there is a difference between solar and lunar years. as the Samvatsara, Parivatsara, Idavatsara, Anuvatsara, and Vatsara pass, 2 extra months are added within each 5 years. This makes a 6 Samvatsara, but because that Samvatsara is extra, the solar system is calculated according to the above 5 names. So if you can hold on to this for now, because this I will have to explain with a diagram. It's difficult to explain verbally, but essentially Srila Prabhupada is trying to explain how we collect the fractions, right? Because it's not that the sun is exactly 1 day short of the Kal Chakra in terms of angular speed, right? It is 0.98134 degrees shorter. So the years don't round off to numbers. And we have experience with that, that in the solar cycle, every 4 years, there's a leap year. Why is there leap year? Because the year is not really 365 days, it's 365 and a quarter. So every 4 years, they add another day. But that creates an excess, which is why after every, I believe after every 100 years, the leap year is not a leap year, right? So for years that are divisible by 100, the leap years are still 365 days. But then that corrects on the other side, which means that after every 400 years, the leap year is actually a leap year, right? So they go back and forth like this to correct for that fraction part of it. This is what is being explained over here, that the days go longer and shorter because one tends to have even number of whole number of days, and they are in this way adjusted. Okay, moving on to verse 8. Above the rays of the sunshine by a distance of 100,000 yojanas, 800,000 miles, is the moon, which travels at a speed faster than the sun. In 2 lunar fortnights, the moon travels through the equivalent of a samvatsara of the sun. In 2.25 days, it passes through a month of the sun. And in 1 day, it passes through a fortnight of the sun. Okay, so now, Prabhu had asked about the relative movement, impact of the relative distance, speed between the sun and the moon. This verse is explaining that. So first, the vertical positioning of the moon. So there is the Bhumandal. 100,000 yojanas above the Bhumandal is the sun. And the sun is located at 14.75 million yojanas horizontally. Right, so vertically 100,000 yojanas, 14.75 million yojanas horizontally is the sun. Now another 100,000 yojanas above the sun is the moon, located at 200,000 yojanas, also located horizontally, but it is much, I don't remember the distance, but it is much closer to Mount Meru than the sun. The sun is all the way 15.75 million yojanas. The moon is just a few 100,000 yojanas away from Mount Meru. So that's why Srila Prabhupada will sometimes say that the sun is closer to the earth than the moon. Why? Because if you only look at the vertical distance, the sun is 100,000 yojanas above Bhumandal, and the moon is 200,000 yojanas. So yes, the sun is closer to the Bhumandal than the moon. But if you look at the horizontal distance and then you look at the straight line, the hypotenuse, then the sun is much farther away than the moon. So now we know that the moon is 100,000 yojanas above the sun. We also know that in the retrograde direction, the moon is moving much faster than the sun, right? So just like the sun has two movements, it has a clockwise movement, which is in an absolute sense, and it has an anti-clockwise movement, which is with respect to the Kal Chakra. The moon also has two kinds of movements. One is the independent clockwise, and the second is the retrograde respect to the Kal Chakra. So for the sun, the relative movement with respect to the Kal Chakra gets it to slip a degree behind, so that after 1 year, it comes back to the same point that it was. And that we had said is a solar year. Then we already also said that independent of the Kal Chakra, the clockwise movement of the sun is the 24-hour period, a 1 day and night. So in the clockwise movement, the sun moves, and when it comes back to the same position, then essentially 1 full day and night are over, right? So now we understand that these two movements are there in the sun. So corresponding to the 365 clockwise revolutions of the sun are the 27 clockwise revolutions of the moon, right? So in 365 clockwise revolution, the sun is back to the same point with respect to the Kal Chakra. In 27 clockwise revolution of the moon is back at the same point where it started. Because we said that the relative speed of the moon with respect to the Kal Chakra is higher in the opposite directions. So the sun needs to make 365 clockwise revolutions before it comes back to the same position with respect to the Kal Chakra. But the moon needs to only make 27 clockwise revolutions before it comes back to the same starting point with respect to the Kal Chakra. So what does that mean? That the 1 year of the sun, which is 365 clockwise revolution, is equal to 1 year of the moon, which is 27 clockwise revolutions. Because in this time, they come back to the same position, right? So now, so far we were comparing the sun and the moon with respect to the Kal Chakra. Now let us compare the sun and the moon with respect to one another, right? So we've established the relative motion of the sun and the moon with respect to Kal Chakra. So from this, we can understand that 1 lunar day is equal to 1 solar fortnight. And 2.25 lunar days is 1 solar month. And 2 lunar fortnights is equal to 1 solar year, right? So if you do the maths, then you will come to this number. Now, the clockwise movement of the sun causes the day and night. The anti-clockwise movement of the sun causes the months, seasons, and years. Similarly, the anti-clockwise movement of the moon causes the waxing and the waning, right? So we see the moon growing and shrinking. That is caused because of the anti-clockwise movement of the moon. And the clockwise movement of the moon causes the daily appearance and disappearance of the sun, right? So now we know what is the impact. The clockwise movement of the sun causes day and night. The clockwise movement of the moon causes the daily appearance and disappearance. The anti-clockwise movement of the sun causes the year, and the anti-clockwise movement of the moon causes the waxing and the waning. Okay, so we also established that when the sun moves in the anti-clockwise direction, it is spanning 12 zodiacs. And when the moon moves in an anti-clockwise direction, it is spanning 27 constellations. So that's why the 2.25 number comes. That the 12 zodiacs going into 27 means that there are 2.25 constellations in each zodiac. And to make matters a little bit more complex, because again, lunar days are not like the solar days, they're not complete. So every 3 years, an additional constellation appears, which is called Abhijit. And then that makes it 28 constellations. But that's, just know that it's there to adjust for just like we add a day. So we add the Abhijit constellation in order to adjust for this gap between the two. Okay.
Prabhuji,
Um,
one more question, Prabhuji. Like, correct me if my understanding is wrong, Prabhuji. Like, I was so far thinking that as per the Vedic system, 360 days only makes an year. Only Western calendar makes 365 days. Is that understanding correct, Prabhuji? Or
it's correct.
okay. Yeah, then okay, Prabhuji. Yeah.
It's
Then leap year, non-leap year concept comes in Vedic calendar, Prabhuji?
not in Vedic calendar. Vedic calendar, we have the Adhik Maas.
Adhik Maas, okay.
So the Adhik Maas comes once in 4 years to adjust for this difference there, right?
Okay.
The Vedic year is not exactly 360 degrees, because for it to be 360, the difference between the Kal Chakra and the sun has to be 1 degrees, right? But it is actually, in the Vedic system, is calculated to be a little less than 1 degree. It is calculated to be, I think I have written somewhere, let's see.
You just mentioned 0.98138, Prabhuji.
0.9836 degrees,
6.
right? So it is 0.9836 degrees. But they also, so now we are getting into astronomy. So, but this 0.9836 degrees is averaged over 3 years. So they take 3 years movement and average it out to be 0.9836 there. So by that calculation, the year actually comes out to be closer to 365 than to 360. That if you take 0.9836 and then say how many 0.9836 make 360, then you'll get a number that is closer to 365. Right?
Okay, so both calendars in a way same.
Both of them are similar. Okay. And the Adhik Maas is really to align the solar and the lunar calendars. Right. It's not so much to calculate add the round offs. It does that also. But the Adhik Maas comes to align because as was said, that the sun gains 7 days, the moon loses 7 days. So over time, these 14 days build up, and then every 3 years it becomes a month. So then you add the Adhik Maas, and then they're lined up again after that. Okay, so
Prabhuji, little bit confused with the lunar calendar, Prabhuji. Like as per our earthly calculation, how 27 days makes 1 day for moon, Prabhuji? Is that how I should understand? Little confused between the lunar day and lunar year, how long it takes.
So lunar year is also so you'll have to calculate. So I don't think I did the calculation, but consider the fact that the moon moves 13.11475 degrees slower than the Kal Chakra. Right? So based on that, then you can calculate how long will it take, how many revolutions will it take to be back in the same position where it started. Essentially, what is 360 divided by 13.11475? That will be your lunar year.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, Prabhuji. And lunar day, Prabhuji? Like
the lunar day So the way that we can calculate the lunar day is by the forward motion of the moon. Right. So the forward angle of the moon so it doesn't give in degrees, but based on the relative movement, it says, so this is not with respect to the Kal Chakra, but with respect to sun. That one lunar day is one solar fortnight.
Okay.
Because remember that in the clockwise direction, the moon is moving a lot slower than the sun.
Correct.
So its days are a lot longer than the sun. So it takes one clockwise direction movement for the sun to make one day, and it takes one clockwise movement for the moon to make one day. But in the clockwise direction, the sun is moving a lot faster than the moon.
Okay. So if I have to say, for in one lunar day means like for the moon to make one clockwise circle,
the sun would have made 14
14
clockwise
14
setting, right? Because the sun is moving a lot faster than the moon.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
How does the week 7 days come into picture? Like we have the cycle of 7 days, right? How does that come into picture in this movement of the planets?
I haven't read anywhere them talking about the division of the month in a week. So not from an astronomical perspective, but Prabhupada notes at one point that based on the deities, so there are 7 deities in the amongst the heavenly planets, and that each day is basically named after them, right? Like Ravivar is after sun, Somvar is after moon, Mangalvar is after Mars. So that's the mention that he makes. Let me check my notes again and see if there is any astronomical notion of the division of the month into weeks. I can't think of any at the top of my head.
Because the Gregorian calendar, the name of the days, and also the name of the days as per the Vedic calendar is very similar. It's not too different, isn't it? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all these days more or less matches with the Vedic calendar. That's my understanding. I don't know how that happens, but anyway, Prabhu, I just thought I will ask you.
And yeah, Prabhupada actually does say that. He uses that to say that he talks about the Vedic influence on the Western world. That just like in the Vedic notion, the days are given to a demigod, we see that same influence in the Western, even though they don't accept that notion of demigods, right? So he talks about it from the fact that the Western civilization is a corrupted descendant of the Vedic civilization. And so that part you're right. I think your original question, I still don't know. That why 7 days? Why not 8 days? Why not 9 days? You could have 10 days and 3 weeks in a month as opposed to 7 days and 4 and odd week. That part I don't know. As far as I know, it's not described anywhere. But it may be worthwhile for me to check a little bit more.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Okay, verse 9. When the moon is waxing, the illuminating portion of it increases daily, thus creating day for the demigods and night for the Pitras. When the moon is waning, however, it causes night for the demigods and days for the Pitas. In this way, the moon passes through each constellation of stars in 30 muhurtas. The moon is the source of nectarian coolness that influences the growth of food grains. And therefore, the moon god is considered the life of all living entities. He's constantly called Jiva, the chief living being within the universe. So this point I discussed earlier, that the side of the moon that faces the earth is occupied by the Devas, who are called the Sadhyas. And the far side that is not visible is occupied by the Pitras. So when it is waxing, so we had noted that the relative movement of the moon with respect to the Kala Chakra causes the waxing and the waning effects. So when it is waxing, it creates the day of the Vedas, and when it is waning, it is creating the day of the Pitras. So it passes through one constellation, and this, I think we have to kind of keep a mental model that the sun travels through the zodiacs and the moon travels through the constellations. There are 12 zodiacs, and then there are 27 constellations. So they both represent 360 degrees. So when the moon has traveled through all the constellations, it is back to the same position. Just like when the sun has traveled through all the zodiacs, it is back to the same position. So the moon, it travels through one constellation in 30 muhurtas, right? So 30 muhurtas is 1 day. And in 2.25 lunar days, it passes through one zodiac. And because we said that there are 12 zodiacs and 27 constellations, there is 2.25 constellations within a zodiac. So in each zodiac, it is traveling in 1 day. Each constellation is traveling in 1 lunar day. So each zodiac, it travels in 2.25 lunar day. So each constellation is so the 2.25 lunar days is equivalent to 1 solar month, because we also said that the time that it takes the sun to move through a zodiac is 1 month. And now we are saying that the time that it takes the moon to travel through one zodiac is 2.25 lunar days. So then we can establish the equivalency that 2.25 lunar days is equal to 1 solar month. And also the fact that each constellation is occupied by one of the 27 wives of Soma, the daughters of Prajapati Daksha. Okay, let's move on to verse 10. Because the moon is full of potentialities, it represents the influence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The moon is the predominating deity of everyone's mind, and therefore the moon god is called Manomaya. He is also called Annamaya because he gives potency to all herbs and plants, and is called Amritmaya because he is the source of life for all living entities. The moon pleases the demigods, pitas, human beings, animals, birds, reptiles, trees, plants, and all other living entities. Everyone is satisfied by the presence of the moon. Therefore, the moon is called Sarvamaya, all pervading. So this verse is a glorification of moon. 4 qualities of the moon are glorified in this verse. That moon is Manomaya, predominating deity of everyone's mind. Annamaya gives potency to plants and herbs. Amritmaya, it is a source of life for all living entities. And Sarvamaya, it pleases everybody. Okay, verse 11. There are many stars located 200,000 yojanas, 1.6 million miles above the moon. By the supreme will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are fixed onto the wheel of time. And thus they rotate with Mount Sumeru on the right, their motion being different from that of the sun. There are 28 important stars headed by Abhijit. So in this verse, Sukadeva Goswami is describing the constellations. Right? So he says 28. So there are 27. The 28th is a special one. So, but he's saying there are 28. So they are essentially 200,000 yojanas above the moon. And these are fixed to the Kala Chakra. So they move in exactly the same direction, in the same speed as the Kala Chakra. And because the moon is moving a little slower than the Kal Chakra, it gives the impression of the moon moving through this constellation in the opposite direction. Okay, next verse. Some 1.6 million miles above the group of stars is the planet Venus, which moves at almost exactly the same pace as the sun, according to the swift, slow, and moderate movement. Sometimes Venus moves behind the sun, sometimes in front of the sun, and sometimes along with it. Venus nullifies the influence of the planets that are obstacles to rainfall. Consequently, its presence causes rainfall, and it is therefore considered very favorable for all living beings within this universe. This has been accepted by the learned scholars. So what Sukadeva Goswami is doing now, he is now going vertically upwards. He described the sun as being 100,000 yojanas above Bhumandal. The moon is 200,000 yojanas above the Bhumandal. Then if you go another 200,000 yojanas above the moon, then you have now the 27 constellations. If you were to go another 200,000 yojanas above this constellation, then you get Ushana. Ushana is the planet Venus. And just like the other planets, it also moves at a speed that is different from the Kal Chakra. So it moves at almost exactly the same speed as the sun. So it is, but not exactly the same, it's almost the same speed. And Sukadeva Goswami says the moon is considered to be a favorable planet because it nullifies the influence of planets that obstruct the rain. Okay, so we have the sun, the moon, the constellations, and now we have Venus. Verse 13. Mercury is described to be similar to Venus in that it moves sometimes behind the sun, sometimes in front of the sun, and sometimes along with it. It is 1.6 million miles above Venus or 7.2 million miles above Earth. Mercury, which is the son of moon, is almost always very auspicious for the inhabitants of the universe. But when it does not move along with the sun, it forebodes cyclones, dust, irregular rainfall, waterless clouds. In this way, it creates a fearful condition due to inadequate or excessive rain. So Srimad Bhagavatam also later will explain Mercury is Buddha, and Buddha is the son of Soma. So Buddha was created by the illicit connection between Som and the wife of Brahaspati, Tara. Right. So in Mahabharata, Abhimanyu is considered to be an incarnation of Buddha. Is 200,000 yojanas above Venus, and it says that his movement is very similar to Venus. So generally it is auspicious, but because there is a slight difference between its movement and the sun, there are times where it moves behind the sun. And it is said that where at the times when it is not moving along with the sun, then at that time it creates inauspiciousness. Right? So these are the kinds of things that the astrologers look at. When they look at your chart, they see that whether Mercury is retrograde, Venus is retrograde, etc. And based on that, they talk about its auspiciousness and inauspiciousness. Okay, verse 14. Situated 1.6 million miles above Mercury or 8.8 million miles above Earth is the planet Mars. If this planet does not travel in a crooked way, it crosses each sign of the zodiac in 3 fortnights. And in this way, it travels through all 12, one after another. It almost always creates unfavorable conditions in respect to rainfall and other influences. So astrologically, Mars is considered to be a malefic planet. It is inauspicious. So from a vertical distance, it is 200,000 yojanas above Mercury. Now, not much is talked about the speed relative to the sun and the moon. So we see that Sukdev Goswami, he only gives special attention to the sun and the moon because they are prominently visible from Earth. After that, he speaks in general terms that if it does not move in a crooked direction, which means sometimes it does move in a crooked direction. Sometimes it's moving in the same direction as the sun. Sometimes it's moving in the opposite direction of the sun. So if Mercury is not retrograde, it passes each of the zodiac signs in 3 fortnights, and is generally considered to be inauspicious and creates grief. Verse 15. Situated 1.6 million miles above Mars or 10.4 million miles above Earth is the planet Jupiter, which travels through one sign of the zodiac within the period of a parivatsara. If his movement is not curved, the planet Jupiter is very favorable to the Brahmanas of the universe. So another 200,000 yojanas above Mars is Jupiter. And Jupiter is considered favorite. Brahaspati, it is the planet of the spiritual master of the demigods. And that's why it is very favorable to the Brahmanas. And it moves through each of the zodiac sign in one parivatsara. So earlier on, Sukadeva Goswami had talked about the 5 years of the sun. So one of them is the Samvatsara, the other is the Parivatsara. And they are created again by speed variations that come because of the vertical movement of the sun. So the time of the Jupiter is aligned to a Parivatsara. And within the period of Parivatsara, it moves through each zodiac sign. Verse 16. Situated 1.6 million miles above Jupiter or 12 million miles above Earth is the planet Saturn, which passes through one sign of the zodiac in 30 months and covers the entire zodiac circle in 30 anuvatsaras. This planet is always very inauspicious for universal situation. So another 200,000 yojanas, you have Shani. And Shani is considered to be inauspicious. It's a very slow moving planet. So the sun takes 1 month to travel through a zodiac, and Saturn takes 30 months to travel through a zodiac. So in this way, for all the 12 zodiacs, it takes 30 anuvatsaras. Last verse of the chapter. Situated 8.8 million miles above Saturn or 20.8 million miles above Earth are the 7 saintly sages who are always thinking of the well-being of the inhabitants of the universe. They circumambulate the supreme abode of Lord Vishnu, known as Dhruv and the pole star. So now we have come to the very top of the heavenly planets, which is the Saptarishis. They are right below the Dhruv. So they are above the Saturn by 1.11 million yojanas. And these are the 7 planets that are occupied by the Saptarishi that are always thinking of the welfare. Right above them is the Dhruv Tara. On the Dhruvaloka resides Shodaksha Vishnu. So there is the ocean of milk over there, and in the ocean of milk. So the Dhruvaloka is not one star; it's a collection of stars. So amongst them, one of them is the star or the planet of Shodaksha Vishnu. So they circumambulate Dhruv, who is a pure devotee of the Lord, and they also circumambulate the supreme abode of Lord Vishnu. So Lord Vishnu in Shodaksha form lives there. So in this way now the vertical structure of the universe going upwards has been described. From the Bhumandala, we have the moon, then we have the sun, then we have the zodiacs, then we have the constellations, then we have each of these planets that start from Mercury and end up all the way till the Saturn and the Saptarishis. That's the upper planetary system. Next, we will discuss the lower planetary system, the 7 lower planets. Okay, so with this, we are at the end of the chapter. Next week, we will do the in the next chapter. So I'll pause for any questions or comments.
Prabhuji, one question. Is the zodiacs lie above the sun and below moon, Prabhuji, or below sun? Where are zodiacs are situated, Prabhuji?
So the zodiacs are above the sun but below the moon.
Below the moon. Okay.
And the constellations are above the moon.
Above the moon. Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Anyway, when you do the presentation, visually you will understand more.
The visual will help a lot in there. So now we have some kind of a conceptual model. And once we see the visual, then it kind of becomes more visible. The visual model helps in understanding the structure of the universe. But the movement of the universe is still very theoretical. It's difficult to visualize it.
One thing I'm still puzzled, Prabhu, about the distance of the moon, and he said 100 and 200 yojana above the sun is a moon, but for us here we see the moon closer than the sun, and this little part is a bit confusing. Anyway, we say we should not think about the science that we have learned, but what we can see the moon. And this moon, I don't know if it's the moon that we are talking about or it's a different moon. I'm always confused with that. It's a bit difficult to understand.
So the vertical distance of the moon is more than that of the sun. The sun is 100,000 yojanas and the moon is 200. But if you take a straight line distance, then the moon is a lot closer than the sun. So if you take the Meru mountain and draw a straight line to the sun, that is 15.75 million yojanas. And if you draw a straight line to the moon, and I don't know, I don't remember that distance, but that is a few 100,000 yojanas there. So what we see is not much different from what the Vedic model is promising. That the moon is actually a lot closer than the sun, but it's just it is higher in the vertical plane, but closer in the horizontal plane.
Prabhu, regarding Bhumandal being fixed, and also Bhuloka, our Earth planet is also fixed. It's not spinning also, right? In its axis, it doesn't spin also on its own axis, according to Vedic paradigm, right?
Right.
It kind of makes sense. I don't know. I try to understand the air travel. When we go to India, from here to India, we are flying east. And if we think the modern science, according to modern science, Earth is also spinning. So then we have to beat the speed of the Earth in order to travel east to reach India. And on the contrary, when we travel west from India to Canada, it should be much faster, isn't it? I don't know how that works. It's difficult for me to understand. Maybe modern science has some explanation I have not read through. But it makes sense to see the Earth being stationary, and then these movements can be easily explained. Anyway, I thought something.
That's why, Prabhu, it takes sometimes 14 hours to go to Dubai. When you come back, it takes 16 hours, for example, for us. It's like 1 hour more. We say, why 1 hour more? Because the same distance. Actually, because of the rotation of the Earth, it adds up another hour to catch up, something like that.
Yeah, it's possible, by like what Nankumar Prabhu is saying, that yes, that explanation it's difficult to reconcile. And there's of course a scientific explanation that while you're traveling within the atmosphere, you're bound to the Earth by the gravitational force. So when the plane is moving, then it is in a way the gravitational force is anchoring it to the Earth's surface. So it is also moving at So his relative motion position with respect to the Earth planet does not change. But by virtue of its engine, that relative motion is the only motion that comes there. And between the, like Sarang Prabhu is saying, between the West and the East, the difference is actually because of, and this is a scientific expression, because the jet streams. That because the jet streams move in a certain direction, when the plane is moving along with the jet streams, then it travels much faster as opposed to against the jet stream. All the seminars that I kind of attended to in terms of Bhagavad cosmology, the speakers do keep making this point that if you can suspend your comparison to the empirical science, it will help you. So they don't say that you jettison or abandon it. They say suspend, because as it is, these things are complicated. And then for everything, if you start trying to reconcile, but this moves like that moves like that, it becomes exponentially more complicated. So the recommendation is that first understand the Vedic model in its entirety, and then you can try and reconcile it. And most of the time there are ways to reconcile it, but not during the process when it is being developed. So they say then an already difficult topic becomes a lot more difficult. Okay, so we're a little over time. We'll stop now. And next week we will do the next chapter, or maybe we'll try and do, because the next chapter has only 9 verses in it. So we'll do the next chapter and maybe parts of the chapter after that. So next chapter is Shishumar, is the description of the universal dolphin. And the chapter after that talks a little bit more about the seasons, etc. Right. So I don't think we'll be able to complete 2 chapters, but we'll definitely do the chapter 23 and parts of 24. And then I think we also need to work out with Prem Kishore Prabhu when we take a break, because I think what I understand is that almost all of you are going for the yatra. So we'll have to figure out when's the time that you're going for the yatra, and when do we stop and when do we resume. And I want to be sure that when you come back, then I am ready with the seminar. And hopefully before you go, I'm able to finish this, the 5th canto, because the chapters are now not very complicated. They're mostly descriptive chapters. Okay, thank you very much. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anant Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nithai Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna.